that is trying to stop you from doing the job that the President of the United States has given you. Bless you for what you're doing, and bless the United States of America.
Mr. President.
Senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, I rise today, I believe, as the penultimate speaker before we have a vote on the War Powers Resolution, the bipartisan resolution I have filed with Senators Paul, Schiff, and Schumer. I rise today in support of our troops who don't deserve to be sent into war unless this Congress votes that there should be such a war. I pray for the families who are learning that their loved ones will not come home. I pray for the families whose children or spouses are deployed overseas, unable to sleep with worry about them. Mr. President, I've paid attention over the course of the last 13 months as this president has again and again and again used our troops to carry out military action without coming to Congress. I've paid attention to the reasons that my colleagues are giving who want to give the president an easy pass around the Constitution. When we had a vote last summer about the attack on Iran at the end of the Israeli 12-day war, by the time the vote had been called up, that bombing mission was in the rearview mirror. And so my colleague from Idaho said, there's no hostilities. The hostilities are over. So you should vote against the resolution on that ground. When we called up an effort to constrain the president from illegally striking boats in international waters, the legal rationale asserted by my colleagues and the White House to vote down a War Powers Resolution and end run the Constitution was, these are pinprick strikes that don't rise to the level of war. Only if it's war must the White House come to Congress. When I brought forward a resolution a month or so ago to say no war in Venezuela without a vote of Congress, again, my colleague from Idaho said, this isn't war, it's over. It was one and done. There are no troops left in Venezuela. One reason after the next to give the president an easy pass lane around the Constitution. Well, today we're dealing with something different. You can't stand up and say this is a pinprick that doesn't lead to the level that would be characterized as war. You can't stand up and say this is one and done and no troops are engaged in hostilities against Iran. Members of the Senate, this is war. The President of the United States has called it a war against Iran. The head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, has called it a war against Iran. Secretary Rubio, our Secretary of State, has called it a war against Iran. All of the excuses that you've advanced to give the president an easy pass around the Constitution and suggest he needn't come to Congress all evaporate because this is a war. It's a war. Many of my colleagues know that during the classified briefing yesterday, I can't reveal information given to me, but I can say what I said. And I challenged the body, including the administration witnesses, your escalating pattern of military action without seeking our approval convinces me that you believe you never need to come to Congress to wage war against anyone, anywhere. I hoped that someone might refute my point and tell me I'm wrong, and they would come to Congress, but no one did. And so here we are in a war that has cost American lives, that is leading to chaos throughout the region, that threatens to go bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm asking the Senate to do what the framers of the Constitution said we should do, debate and vote about matters of war. What are the arguments now that the other side has made to suggest we should vote down this resolution. First, they say that Iran are bad actors. On that, we would agree. If you put in a resolution, Iran has carried out a lot of bad actions, you get a 100-0 vote in this body on that resolution. But being a bad actor is not an easy pass around the Constitution. It does not allow us to take our sons and daughters into war and risk their lives without a debate and vote. That is not a sufficient rationale. And the other rationale, and you just heard my colleague make it, was that the effort to bring a war powers resolution, a bipartisan resolution before this body, is somehow partisan. It's this side trying to come to the aid of the regime. There's nothing partisan about the Constitution. There's nothing partisan about caring for our kids and wanting to have a debate before they get sent into harm's way to risk their lives. This is not a partisan issue on our side. We are basically asking a question of the entire Senate, indeed of the entire nation. Have we learned nothing from 25 years of war in the Middle East? 14,000 American troops and contractors killed in Iran and Afghanistan. More than 65,000 American troops and contractors injured in these wars. These nearly 80,000 people were from every walk of life, every state and territory, every race, every age, every rank, every religion, every gender. They only had two things in common. A, they had a patriotic desire to serve their country, and B, their futures were dramatically affected, in some instances eliminated, because of 25 years of war in the Middle East. Someone suggested yesterday that this resolution was our effort to gum up the work of the... What is the work of the Senate? What is the work of the Senate if it's not to discuss the circumstances under which we should send our kids into war? In addition to the lives lost of American troops and contractors and those injured, hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths, innocent civilian deaths in Iran and Afghanistan. More than $8 trillion spent that could have been spent on American health care, on American housing, on American education, spent on the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And what did we get for it? What did we get for it? If people think 25 years of war in the Middle East was a good thing or produced something, I hope they would come to the floor and tell us what we gained from it. This effort to force a vote is not about partisanship, it's about the Constitution, but even more importantly, it's about the lives of our troops and the question of what, in fact, we got from 25 years of war in the Middle East, and whether we should continue that, quote, forever war. The president tweeted out the phrase forever war today when he talked about the munitions that we have. We don't need illegal wars. We don't need forever wars. We don't need more wars in the Middle East. Let me say this and conclude and yield to our Democratic leader. I've said this to my colleagues before. I came to this body in 2013 with the experience of being a governor and watched my Virginians repeatedly deployed time after time after time, active duty Guard, Reserve, DOD civilians, Virginia National Guard, into the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I went to the deployments, and I went to the homecomings, and I went to the wakes, and I went to the funerals. And I signed the condolence letters that all governors sign when they get the bad news that one of their own has lost their lives in war. And when I came to this body in 2013, I said that I would do anything I could in my power to stop any president, Democrat or Republican, from waging war without coming to Congress. And I would especially do anything I could to stop an unwise, unnecessary war that puts our troops' lives at risk for no legitimate reason. Colleagues who've been with me since 2013 know that I've upheld that standard against presidents of both parties. When President Obama wanted to use military action in Syria to punish the Syrian regime for using chemical weapons against its own citizens, even though I was his friend, I stood up and said, you cannot do that without a vote of Congress. Presidents can defend against incoming attack, protect against Houthis firing at our ships in the Red Sea. Presidents can act when there is a pre-existing congressional authorization to go after terrorists who Congress voted that presidents should be able to act against. But in this instance, there is no congressional authorization on the books that would authorize this military action. And as my colleagues have amply demonstrated, The administration, in their shifting set of rationales, and even in a classified setting, could produce no evidence, none, that the U.S. was under an imminent threat of attack from Iran. It's easy to try to dismiss this by saying, oh, it's about partisanship. And those who would say that say it so they don't have to grapple, I believe, with their own sense of unease about what we are starting on right now. Perhaps this war will be over in a few weeks or a few months. We pray that it will be. But that's what we thought about the war in Iraq when we claimed that the mission was accomplished, when we claimed that we were met as liberators, and yet years and years and years later, troops from all of our states were still coming home deeply wounded and affected, both physically and in their mental health from those wars, from seeing what happened to them and their friends. Some never came home. If there's one thing we do that we have to get right, it's this. It's this. We can't afford to hide under a desk and let any president, Democrat or Republican, send our best and brightest, our own kids, into war to risk their lives unless we have debated it, we have determined it's in the national interest, we have voted and thereby put our signature and our thumbprint on the notion that it's worth sending our best and brightest to risk their lives. I urge my colleagues, as this is escalating from pinprick strikes to one-off operations, now into full war, even called war by the president and his chief advisors, let's stand up and do what the Constitution requires us to do. I urge a yes vote on my resolution, and I yield the floor.
Democrat Minority Leader.
First, let me thank my friend from Virginia for his stellar leadership on this issue, not just this year, but through the last decade. And he is an inspiration, I think, to all of us. Thank you. I also want to thank Senator Schiff and Paul for joining me and Senator Kaine in this important resolution. Now, Mr. President, today, senators face a choice. Stand with the American people who are tired of war in the Middle East, or side with Donald Trump, who bumbles America into another war most Americans fiercely oppose. Voting on matters of war is one of the most solemn votes a senator can take. This is about whether or not senators are ready to send your sons and your daughters into harm's way. If there was ever a moment for Senate Republicans to take a stand, it's now. The last thing the American people want or need is another war in the Middle East. But if you listen to Secretary Pete Hegseth's press conference this morning, one thing is crystal clear. America is at war, with no plan, no strategy. In his own words, Hegseth said, quote, "We are just getting started." Hegseth said, "We are accelerating, not decelerating." And in the wake of 6 brave Americans who died in uniform, Trump simply says, "There will likely be more. That's the way it is." This, my colleagues, is madness. Americans spent the last 2 decades fighting and dying in the Middle East. Parents watched their kids shipped off to foreign lands. So many lives lost, so many billions wasted, so much suffering and anguish that scarred an entire generation. Why is Donald Trump hell-bent on making history repeat itself? Why is he plunging America headfirst into a war that Americans do not want and which he cannot even explain? Enough is enough. The American people deserve a say, and that is what our resolution is about. We must act to stop Trump's belligerence. The American people will be watching how senators vote. History will judge this chamber for how we act. To my colleagues, all of my colleagues, it is time to make a stand. We must stop another war in the Middle East. Support our resolution. Yield the floor.
Senator from Virginia.
Section 601B of the International Security Assistance and Arms Control Act, I move to discharge the Committee on Foreign Relations from further consideration of S.J. Res. 104 to direct the removal of United States Armed Forces from hostilities within or against the Islamic Republic of Iran that have not been authorized by Congress.
The clerk will report.
Senator from Virginia, Mr. Kane, moves to discharge S.J. Res. 104 to direct the removal of United States Armed Forces from hostilities within or against the Islamic Republic of Iran that have not been authorized by Congress from the Committee on Foreign Relations.
Mr. President.
Senator from Virginia.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. There is. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks. Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Banks. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman. I did, sir. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, gotcha. Mrs. Britt. Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Curtis. Mr. Daines. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. Mr. Fetterman. Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Gallego. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Hassan. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Husted. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Justice. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kim. Mr. King. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Langford. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lujan. Ms. Lummis. Mr. Markey. Mr. Marshall. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McCormick. Mr. Merkley. Mrs. Moody. Mr. Moran. Mr. Marino. Mr. Mullen. Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Murphy. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Ossoff. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Paul. Mr. Peters. Mr. Reed. Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young, Senators voting in the affirmative: also Brooks, Baldwin, Bennett, Blumenthal, Blunt Rochester, Booker, Cantwell, Cortez Masto, Duckworth, Durbin, Gillibrand, Hassan, Heinrich, Hickenlooper, Kane, Kelly, Kim, King, Klobuchar, Lujan, Markey, Merkley, Murray, Padilla, Peters, Reed, Rosen, Sanders, Schatz, Schiff, Schumer, Slotkin, Smith, Van Hollen, Warner, Warnock, Warren, Welch, Whitehouse, and Wyden. Mr. Langford. No. Senators voting: Mr. Coons, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Barrasso, Blackburn, Cassidy, Kramer, Crapo, Fetterman, Graham, Grassley, Haggerty, Hawley, Justice, Langford, Marshall, McCormick, Risch, Rounds, Schmidt, Scott of Florida, Tillis, and Tuberville. Mr. Kennedy, no. Ms. Hirono. Ms. Hirono. Aye. Mr. Sheehy. No. Ms. Lummis, no. Mr. Young, no. Mrs. Moody, no. Mr. Gallego, aye. Mr. Mullen, no. Mr. Scott of South Carolina, no. Mr. Ossoff, aye. Mr. Moran, no. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Banks, no. Mrs. Fisher, no. Ms. Ernst, no. Mr. Johnson, no. Mrs. Capito, no. Ms. Collins? No. Mr. Ricketts, no. Mr. Daines, no. Mr. Murphy? Aye. Mr. Curtis? No. Mr. Paul, aye. Mr. Lee? No. Mrs. Hyde-Smith? No. Mr. Cotton? No. Mr. Sullivan, no. Mr. Budd, no. Mr. Bozeman, no. Mr. Hoven, no. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. Husted, no. Mr. Marino, no. Mr. McConnell, no. Mrs. Britt, no. Mr. Wicker, no. Mr. Thune, no. Mr. Cruz, no.
Mr. Cornyn, no.
On this, the yeas are 47, the nays are 53. The motion to discharge is not approved. I recognize the Majority Whip.
President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the executive session to consider the following nominations in block: calendar number 657 through calendar number 660, calendar 661, with the exception of Colonel Thomas Savart's calendar 662 and calendar 663. And all the nominations in the Secretary's desk, with the exception of PN 681, Dustin B. Elliott, PN 681, Vincent J. Noble, and PN 835, Thomas P. McNeil. That the nominations be confirmed in block, the motions to reconsider be considered and made and laid upon the table, with no intervening action and debate, and that no further motions be in order, that any of the nominations that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of the S-Res 626, which is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 626, designating March 6, 2026 as National Speech and Debate Education Day.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to be reconsidered be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening day, action, or debate.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stands adjourned until 10 a.m. on Thursday, March 5th, that following the prayer and the pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time of the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, morning business be closed, and the Senate resume consideration of H.R. 6644.
Without objection.
Mr. President, for the information of my colleagues, we expect to vote on the reconsideration of cloture of the motion to proceed to DHS appropriations at approximately 1:45 p.m. tomorrow. If there is no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order, following the remarks of Senator Coons.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from Delaware.
Mr. President, I rise to talk about the human cost of war. There is a real and a deep and a lasting cost to every armed conflict, to every war, one paid by brave men and women around the world and by the people who love them. One also paid all too often by civilians, by families, by those considered collateral damage. But before we launch our nation into an intentional war of choice, we should only ask our armed forces members, our soldiers and sailors, our airmen, our Marines, to take on the risks and the loss of war if we are sure why. It's clear today we're engaged in a war in Iran. The Trump administration doesn't seem to be able to agree amongst themselves why. What's the scope? What's the mission? What's the duration? What is the cost that so many may need to bear? At the outset, President Trump was talking regime change and urging Iranians to rise up against the brutal and oppressive regime of the mullahs in the Ayatollah. Now they're not mentioning regime change. Recently, Secretary Rubio and Speaker Johnson said Israel forced our hand, and then Trump said, no, we forced theirs. There's been talk of taking out their Navy, of going after ballistic missile launchers, of preventing the resurrection of a supposedly obliterated nuclear weapons program, but without real clarity. And after months of planning, allegedly, there are hundreds and thousands of Americans in the region, civilians, diplomats, families, in harm's way with no clear path to evacuation. Our embassies and consulates are being bombed and attacked. A number are closed. And there's been no compelling explanation of the urgency of why this was imminent, of why this body, this Senate, couldn't carry out its constitutional role and authorize this war. I represent Delaware. The Dover Air Force Base in the center of our state, in our state capital, is where every American who falls in service to our nation first returns to our soil. And Dover has the honor, the sacred duty, to carry out and support what are called dignified transfers, when planes with dead Americans in flag-draped transfer cases first come off the back of a C-17 to a waiting family and an honor guard. I've stood on the flight line at Dover next to President Trump, President Biden, President Obama, and a whole range of senior military officers as we've witnessed this grave, solemn duty. I was last there in December with President Trump and the two senators from Iowa as we witnessed those Iowans who'd fallen in Syria. And I soon hope to return to be able to join in witnessing and honoring the homecoming of Captain Cody Cork, of Sergeant First Class Noah Tegens, of Sergeant First Class Nicola Moore, and Sergeant Declan Cody. And there are two more Americans fallen so far in this war whose names have not yet been released. All four I just named from Iowa. I am so grateful to the men and women of AFMAO, the Armed Forces Mortuary Affairs Operations Unit, and to Fisher House, a nonprofit-funded special place for the families of the fallen on the grounds of Dover Air Force Base, where those who've just learned of their deep loss are hosted. These are special missions and special places. The volunteers from our community at Fisher House, the service members who staff and support AFMAO, the folks at the Personal Effects Depot who do an incredible job preparing the remains of the fallen for return to their home states for burial. The members of the chaplaincy corps and the military liaison officers who help comfort and engage and support the families. It's the very least we could do as a nation to respect and honor our brave and bold who volunteered to be a part of the greatest military in the world. I'm always grateful when other members of this body join for these dignified transfers. And in the last year, 2 senators from Illinois, 2 senators from Georgia, as well as members of the House, have come and joined in these strikingly awful ceremonies. There is a sound that a mother and a widow make when they first recognize the movement of a flag-draped coffin holding the remains of their loved one that you can never unhear. And that presence, that sound, that grief, that keening into the wind should be on the heart of every senator, of every American leader, as we vote on whether or not to commit our nation's armed forces to war. I come from a family with a long record of military service back to our nation's first war. My brother, my sister-in-law, my father, my uncles all served. I grew up in a home where my father's veteran friends visited and where I knew my brother would follow in my father's footsteps. It seemed to me just a part of American life. And it is, in my view, a great blessing to represent 10,000 service members and their families who are stationed at Dover Air Force Base, and to have had the opportunity to visit and to fly and to support the crews of the C-17s and C-5As based at Dover, and to see how much they've done around the world to re-equip and support our troops, to support our partners and allies, to deliver badly needed relief. In the case of disasters, they carry out an incredible mission. And I can only imagine the heartsick feeling of knowing on the news that there are 6 fallen Americans, but not yet knowing who, and wondering if that terrible knock will come on your door, whether in Dover, Delaware, or any other American base. We should be careful about opening a door into chaos in the Middle East when we can't see the other side of it. We should not take our men and women into war without clear plans, without clear purposes. With our bases now under continuous fire, our president talked casually the other day about how he's been through so much. He has refused to rule out sending boots on the ground to Iran. Has made it clear he understands there will be casualties, maybe many, many more, and says that death in war is just part of the way it is. These 6 fallen so far, and 24 more severely injured, have sacrificed for our nation. Those honored dead gave the last full measure of devotion for us, and we owe them and their families that same respect. Earlier today, just 2 hours ago on this floor, we voted on whether to proceed to a war powers resolution. And I voted yes. I voted to rein in this reckless war of choice. At the very least, what we owe our service members is a debate, a public briefing, an explanation, an accounting of why this war and what its ends are. Just last week, during the President's State of the Union address at the other end of this building, in the House chamber, I sat respectfully as President Trump spoke for nearly 2 hours on every imaginable subject, but he spent just 3 minutes on Iran. For the strengths and weaknesses of President Bush and the approach that led to the Iraq War, I will at least say this. There was briefing after briefing, debate after debate, and a vote in this chamber to authorize that war, as the Constitution requires. That is not happening now. It is not happening here, and it should. So, to the families of the fallen, to the men and women of our nation who are in that 1% that serves and stands in harm's way, know that your nation mourns with you and honors you. Proverbs teaches that the memory of the righteous is a blessing. We hold the memory of these beloved fallen in our hearts, and I pray that the Lord will comfort those who mourn, bind up their wounds, and heal their heartbreak. I pray God grants us all the grace to find a path forward together where more do not needlessly join those who have already fallen in this new war in the Middle East. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.